And we welcome you back into Bowdoin Park, Wappingers Falls, New York, on a picturesque November day as we get set for the championship window. First for New York, and then followed by the Northeast regions. We're very efficient on this particular web stream, part of our Super Saturday of coverage. 5 regionals across the country for Nike Cross regionals in 2024. Southeast, Southwest, the South, which started our day this morning, and now on to the Northeast and to New York. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Swangard, joined by Tom Fuhrer, who's been calling some of the early action here, and really picturesque conditions. Tom, the weather conditions relatively mild in a place in the country where you just kind of have to hold your breath even 48 hours before race day because you just don't know what to expect weather-wise.
That's true, and the wind has picked up considerably since the start of the day. You see it a little bit there, but the wind is now 13 miles per hour, the gust 29 miles per hour, especially on the exposed parts of the course. It's a bit chilly, and it is treacherous out there, Paul. There are various muddy spots, a lot of gravel and rocks, and this change from surfaces to macadam to the course where there are big roots sticking out in a narrow area can be extremely treacherous, and we've seen that today already.
Well, as the final run-ups come up here shortly for the boys, I mean, this is one of the unique features of this particular regional season, Tom, is that we're actually here in Wappingers Falls, not only to crown a Nike Cross regional individual and some team champions, but this is also part of the New York State Federation Championships this year.
Yeah, it's really nice to have those 2 races combined into one, and now with an extra week of rest, I think you're going to see better performances by this cohort of New York teams and individual athletes at NXN in 2 weeks.
Well, a lot of familiar club names when we talk about some of the top teams and top individuals for racing here in this New York division. Let's start with the preview here, if we can, Tom, as you point to some of the top individuals in this New York boys race this year.
Yeah, Ryan Sykes was the #1 freshman finisher last year at this NXR race, finishing 11th overall. He won the New York State Class A championships. I really like Van Furman. He's in the smaller schools division. He won the Class D New York State Championship by 36 seconds. He won it last year as well. But here's the thing, Paul, and especially on a course like this, he was the #2 steeplechaser, 3,000-meter steeplechaser in the country last year, running 9:07, the #1 returnee. And if there's ever a course where you need a steeplechaser, it is this one. Shane Golio is the #1 returnee. Hasn't had a great season so far, but maybe is peaking for this race. He was 3rd here last year. And then William Tempest, undefeated in 4 races in 2024. He is the #4 returnee from this race from last year, where he was 18th, and he was the New York State Class B champion in 2023 and 2024. And of course, Colony's relying on Owen Conley, the junior, who was 2nd at the New York State Class A meet, who lost to Sykes by just 0.5 of a second. Conley is going to have to lead Colony, try to get them in as a team.
So advancement procedures, if you're relatively new to the Nike Cross regional format, it is the top 5 individuals across the line. However, if they're connected to a team that advances, 2 automatic qualifiers, then they go down to later spots in that top 10. So maybe you can even finish 6th or 7th, still get your way onto the start line in Oregon in early December. Tom, as we look at the ledger here, some of the top teams, only 1 ranked in the current DieStat national rankings, but Colony Central, certainly a name we're familiar with each and every year.
And Owen Conley, who we just spoke about, is the leader there. Interestingly, though, Paul, Colony Central was only 3rd in the New York State meet. They lost to Monroe Woodbury, who won by 22 points over North Rockland, and Colony Central was only 3rd. So Monroe Woodbury has a couple of real studs at the front. We mentioned Shane Golio as one of the top individuals, but also Gavin Catherwood. They should be very low sticks right at the top of this race. Meanwhile, North Rockland relies a little bit more on their packing, although they do have one player that we should see up near the front, Claudel Cherry, who was 6th in the New York State meet.
Oh, I got the screen on this.
Again, 5 Athletes across the line for the respective teams, they get the scores and they're added up together, and the top 2 teams in the team race will be invited to Nike Cross Nationals across all the regions. Anybody who sits outside the top 2 after all of the regionals are complete, there is a blue ribbon panel of judges that will advance a couple of more at-large teams to round out the field. And that really is reflective of sort of each and every year. Different regions have different strengths, and sometimes performances here where maybe you're not at your best, but considered one of the top teams in the country, they'll advance you even if you don't finish in those top 2 positions. But those decisions will be made in a couple of weeks. Short turnaround for those advancing at large, as the race for Nike Cross Nationals to be contested in the first weekend of December, again at Glendoveer Golf Course in Portland, Oregon. Final moments here before the racers get to the line. We get start for racing. Again, the New York State Federation Championships also serving as host for Nike Cross Regionals New York here in 2024, part of the doubleheader at Wappinger Falls, as the Nike Cross Regionals Northeast races for the championships will occur just after this. We're all 4 races in succession here, so you can settle in for the coverage on runnerspace.com. All 4 races here coming at you in rapid-fire succession. This is, Tom, we talk about a lot of variety and a lot of courses around the country for cross-country, and, we're seeing some of these big championship races occurring on this championship Saturday, including all 3 divisions of the NCAAs. But here at Wappinger Falls, it's a really legitimate test of racing, isn't it? This
is what real cross-country's all about, Paul, and even the cowbells along the course that the fans ring. This is a very, very, if it's not the toughest course among all the NXR regions, it is certainly the most treacherous. And the course record has stood for 8 years now, 15-18 flat by David Principi, and I think it's going to be tough to beat, although Joe Barrett in the Northeast race really has a chance to put that away. But it's probably one of the longest standing course records we have at any NXR, Paul.
And in this day and age and era of so many fast high school runners, it is reflective of just how strong that performance was back in 2016 by Principi in racing over this course at 5,000-meter distance and 15-18 flat. The Gator moves across as you can pick out your favorite team or favorite individuals. We get set for racing here in the great state of New York. It is the New York State Federation Championship and as well Nike Cross Regionals New York in 2024.
Almost 300 entrants, Paul, 299. And race strategy will obviously be very key in this. There are some runners that are a little bit better at the uphills, some that are a little bit better at the downhills. The first half of this race is almost entirely uphills. The last half of the race, with just a couple undulations, almost completely downhill. So we'll see, strategy will be very, very key. This is also a very narrow course in some spots. Hard to kind of make your way through to get up near the front at certain parts of this course.
So final moments of reflection here at the start line for the nearly 300 top runners out of New York as they race not only for a Federation Championship, but also a spot at Nike Cross Nationals in Portland, Oregon in early December. First of 4 races here on this course at the championship level. The girls to follow for the New York title after this, and then the boys and girls of the Northeast.
And you can see that wind out there. It is really whipping. Wind chill factor 35 degrees.
Officials ready and in position. Runners are ready as well. And the 2024 New York State Federation Championships at Nike Cross Regionals New York is out and racing on the course here. And it's a very wide expanse, as it always is for these athletes in cross country. But Tom, as you mentioned, it gets very narrow very quickly. So if you're going to want to make a move to get to the front and be a factor in that individual racing to the finish line, you got to do it early.
You have to make a real strategic decision, because if you go out too fast and die along the course, that's not good. But if you have to do and navigate a whole succession of runners, that's not good either. And there is some very, very treacherous footing here, especially when the roots come out on the narrow parts of the course where it's not easy to pass people. There's also very, very large amounts of muddy spots on this course, which makes it hard to navigate. And there is one spot, Paul, about 5 minutes into the race, where you go from macadam downhill onto mud, and then you have to tap dance around roots. So it's a really tough, expansive course, and that comes in about 5 minutes into the race.
Bib 275 is Van Furman of Tri-Valley. We talked about the two-time New York Class D champion, won the New York Fed Championship a year ago. So he settles in along with Shane Golio of Monroe Woodbury, the senior, third at NXR last year, and comfortably settling in to the pace here in the early going. These early steps right along the Hudson River, you cannot ask for a more picturesque place to do some championship racing on this Saturday.
And we mentioned in the pregame show, Van Furman is a steeplechaser. You're not going to see anything on this course that he's not going to be able to negotiate. A tall, thin drink of water. This is probably a great course for him, because in the steeplechase you have various interruptions of tempo to go over hurdles and water jumps. On this course you have various interruptions in tempo by going up, down, around. You also see with the glasses there, Owen Conley with the glasses there on the right. Now Conley's a 154 800-meter runner, a 417.93 1,600-meter runner, and Conley has 2 firsts and 2 seconds in cross country this season, so he's always up near the front and ready to do battle. So our leaderboard is a totally legit leaderboard at this point in the race, Paul.
Well, we're just going to start to see the initial climbs here in the early stages of the racing here. Just about 3 minutes elapsed in this New York State Federation Championship at Nike Cross Regionals New York. And there is Owen Connolly letting the legs do a little bit of a quicker pace here as they come off that climb and down the descent. But this is just a tease, as it were, because the bigger climb is up ahead. And
Conley lost by just 0.5 of a second to Ryan Sykes at the New York State Championships. A bit surprising, Paul, because that 154 800-meter speed would indicate that anybody that got into a kick at the end of the race would be owned by Owen Conley. But he's in very good position. Van Furman, very good position.
Carter Flowers, Bib 222, also among the leaders here early on as the racing continues, and they're going to get themselves up. And, you talked about it. There is a very, very much a variety of terrain underfoot during this race as they transition between some of the grassy dirt areas, and then they'll see some gravel as well. And you really have to be comfortable in understanding how that changes what your level of comfortability is around your grip and your shoes grabbing on the surface.
It's very hard to get into a rhythm and a tempo when there's so many interruptions to your rhythm and tempo, and that's what makes this course so darn difficult and so hard to maneuver on. And then you have to strategically figure out, hey, am I going to try to do my work on the downhills, or am I going to try to do my work on the uphills here? Because one half of this course, the first half uphill, the second half very treacherous, downhill, a lot of twists and turns. You got roots sticking out, mud all over the place. Just a really challenging course. And Ryan Sykes, Paul, right up there, finally. And we've got our leaderboard that we kind of expected.
See in the lower left hand of your screen, the course tracker that's carrying them through up into about the first mile mark here, and then that big ascent that's coming, courtesy of your elevation tracker at the bottom of the screen. It just sort of does look like they're going to climb Everest here in a moment, and then that pretty demonstrative downhill coming off it. But it is just thrown in the middle of this, kind of early stretch of the race, and it really does define oftentimes who's going to remain in that lead group till the end.
Yeah, and they're going to hit a spot here where they hit that macadam and then go downhill where all the roots are. It's a much more difficult situation here. It's coming up right now. But when you have all these guys together going down at this spot where the mud is and where the tree roots are, they're all together. There's not a lot of space to do it. Look at how narrow it is.
And look at how that crowd adds to that compression of the width of this race course. Now you see a good look at those roots here. So if you're not focused on your footpath and you're worried about who's in front or behind you, you may miss one there, and that could be a disaster. But everyone's traversed that here in the early going. Our first split won't come until the halfway mark here, so we're just trying to identify here people as they go through the early stage of the race. Again, we mentioned Carter Flowers in bib number 222, Ryan Sykes in the orange in bib 121. 71 is Owen Connolly of Colony, factoring also into potentially a team bid in a race for the top two finishes here as they go alongside that playground area, and again will find themselves with another climb back-to-back.
Carter Flowers is the New York State Class C champion. Maybe a little bit of a surprise for him to be leading at this juncture, but he definitely has his bona fides, Paul. This year, he is his last 3 races, all wins. Last 4 races, actually, all wins. So he has really peaked very well for the end of the season.
So from our stationary camera, the leaders run by. Looks like, about a dozen there in the early going. Maybe a little bit of wear and tear on the look of Owen Connolly in the back of that lead group here, but this is really a grind, Tom, is that this takes so much out of you in the early part of the race.
It really does, and then the adaptation you have to make to go on the downhills right after absorbing all of these uphills, and that's where we're going to see this race broken open, is on those downhills, Paul. Pace is a little slow, not surprising. We have a large group up in front, but we're going to be coming up to that juncture of the halfway point, and we'll be able to get splits as well as ascertain what the team scenario is here very shortly.
And a great look at the rest of the group here, where this is the point in the progression of first to last that really defines the team race, as those third, fourth, and fifth runners that will ultimately contribute to that final score. That's where you can really pick up some points, because there's so many people to the left and to the right of you.
And Ryan Sykes, you can see the trouble that he had making that turn, but he is, as we had thought, this is the downhill. This is where you can really break this thing open, and Sykes did exactly that, despite almost taking a Brody there around the turn, because he's going so fast. He's got such great momentum, and the footing is so poor up there, but he has really blasted this thing open.
We'll get contact again with the lead gator here in just a moment as they come out of the wooded area, and back to the look at the clock as we reach 9 minutes elapsed in this boys New York Championship race. Again, the New York State Federation Championship, as well as Nike Cross Regionals here in 2024. But that is the strategic measure of risk here, Tom, is really coming off that steep climb. It's the only time you see that hill in the race, and so if you're really wanting to try to get yourself into a position to get yourself out and into the lead, it's the chance to do it there, and that's what Owen Connolly did. As we are getting now our splits in the left side, as we're going to get back in contact hopefully with the leaders here in a moment, it is Carter Flowers officially the leader at the halfway mark, with Ryan Sykes and then Mark Sherry of North Rockland in third, Isanovsky of Saratoga Springs in fourth, and Benjamin Berman in fifth. Again, the top 5 individuals all get individual invitations to Nike Cross Nationals. As we get back in contact with the leaders, Sykes now has opened up a bit of a lead here against Sykes as they continue to race on the back half of the race.
Paul, Monroe Woodbury has done a heck of a job placing their athletes in what was a very close state, or maybe not that close state meet. They've blown it open here. Gavin Catherwood in 7th, Shane Golio in 8th. Those are the two guys you expect to be on top of the leaderboard, but the rest of their team has really come through in the clutch here to really break this team battle completely wide open. And Monroe Woodbury's got Devin Ryan in 41st as their number 3 man, and really doing a number. Ronaldo Rodriguez Perez in 49. So 4 of the top 49 runners in this race coming from Monroe Woodbury with a couple of those very, very low sticks. Very, very helpful. What is surprising is Xavier. Xavier was the number 4 ranked team in the New York region coming into this, and Xavier right now in 2nd ahead of Colony, as we know, the number 19 team ranked in the country. So a bit of surprise, a good performance, a good come-through performance for Xavier.
Another look from one of our stationary cameras. Apologize for the degradation of the signal between the lead gator and our production. That is a common occurrence here at Wappingers Fall, given the nature of the way that this course is kind of tucked inside of those wooded areas. So trying to go back to it as best we can when we regain that signal, as we try to keep an eye here on the leader, Ryan Sykes, who really took the downhill and after the halfway point really has broken this open a bit.
He has, but they're starting to catch up here. Sykes has a very low center of gravity, which makes it easier for him to go down those downhills. But he is starting to, that lead has started to whittle a little bit here. Sykes, of course, knows this course very well. He was the number 1 freshman finisher last year, 2nd number 2 returnee behind Shane Golio, who's leading that Monroe Woodbury team so far to what looks like they're going to perhaps run away with this team title.
Top 2 teams get automatic invitations to Nike Cross Nationals in early December. Those scores, again, at the halfway mark with Monroe Woodbury ahead of Xavier, 124 to 176. Meantime, Owen Connolly trying to stay ahead of, and I think it was Thomas Ivanovsky, who was out of Saratoga Springs, the junior, was 14th at this regional a year ago. I think he's in that chase position. We'll try to get our cameras situated back on them here momentarily as the crowd, you can see that Hudson River off into the distance here in this beautiful setting for racing in New York.
Paul Izanovsky is the number 3 returnee. He was 3rd in the state Class A championship, so he lost to Sykes and he lost to Owen Conley. The young man is a 905 3200 meter and 419.4, and he is really starting to pick apart here Ryan Sykes at the front. Sykes definitely has a bullseye on his back here, and Izanovsky looks like he's about ready to make the pass.
Yeah, and Sykes finally sensed him on his shoulder. Now what happens here? Can Sykes cover the move and try to stay with him for the moment he has? So Izanovsky covers all of that ground to get back to the side of the leader, but has not been able to break through. And oftentimes, strategically, you're wanting to try to break that guy who was in front of you. And now, finally, Izanovsky maybe with a half stride ahead, but this race is definitely not over, even though we've had a change of leadership here into the final stages of this boys' championship race.
What I'm really surprised about, Paul, is that how far a gap these two have over everybody else. I never would have expected that because this field was fairly evenly matched going in, but they have an enormous lead. There's only about a minute and a half left in this race, if that. And I'm just surprised that we're not seeing a little bit more behind these top 2. I don't know that Sykes is toast yet either. We have to see. But Izanovsky, there we go. We finally see our third. But look at the gap between these top finishers. Who would have ever thunk that? Just amazing that there's so much difference there. There you can see Flowers. He fell back to 5th. He was our early leader.
Yeah, I think Flowers has definitely been the one big surprise here, I think, in the individuals so far, seeing if he can hold on for one of those 5 automatic invitations to Nike Cross Nationals as they go back into the woods for just a final moment. This camera kind of adjacent to the near the finish line, as well as we'll await the leaders to come out of that final part of the wooded part of the course and then out into the open to the finish line, expecting to see this battle all the way to the end for the Nike Cross Regionals Championship, as well as the New York State Federation Championship. Team race up for grabs as well, with the top two teams getting automatic invitations as we'll wait for the finish. And here is Ryan Sykes. So Sykes has been able to regather himself as Thomas Eisenowski had challenged him for the lead. Now Eisenowski just trying to hold on for second. One look behind, and Ryan Sykes realizes he will reach the line first as the New York State Federation champion at Nike Cross Regionals, New York. Eisenowski will finish in second.
And Paul, that's William Tempest of Sutherland in third, and then Van Furman finishing fourth, Carter Flowers in fifth.
And you look at Flowers' reaction. He is nearly personally stunned by an effort that stunned many of us who had not necessarily put him on the kind of list of pre-race favorites, but he has got himself assured an invitation, if he wants it, to go across the country and race at Nike Cross Nationals, as the rest of the field now comes fast and furiously, and we await the official and final results and keep an eye on that team race as well.
Paul, I saw a couple of Monroe Woodbury, and we see one there frozen a little bit on the screen coming through. Judging by looking at the finishers, I think Monroe Woodbury is going to win this team title. Of course, the top two go, so that second place is going to be anybody's guess at this point. But Ryan Sykes really did a great job. Once he was passed by Eisenowski, he kept a little bit in reserve there for the finish. Very impressive finish by that young man. And remember that Sykes is only a sophomore, showed a lot of racing savvy for someone so young.
Yeah, after that 11th place finish last year as a freshman, showing that he learned a few things in that initial race and brought that talent and that confidence and education to this course in 2024. Still waiting for official results to populate, so apologize for the delay on that, as well as we'll await the official team results just as soon as we get them. But the sea of humanity has begun to arrive at the finish line as quickly as it started. It is quickly over 5,000 meters the distance here for these young men. The first of 4 championship races in Wappingers Falls on this Super Saturday. The girls of New York will follow here shortly, and then the Northeast Championship races will follow. The scheduled start time for the girls open race about 10 minutes after the hour, so a little less than 15 minutes away.
And I think, Paul, the combination of the Federation Championship with the NXR race, that 2-week delta is really going to be helpful for an athlete like Ryan Sykes to recover and get himself ready for the big one in Portland, Oregon. And you mentioned Flowers, how he was ecstatic with finishing 5th, and I'm sure that young man is going to be delighted to get on an airplane cross-country and head out to Portland, Oregon, to be sure.
Well, that's another reason that extra window of rest and recovery is such a big deal for these, these nether region regionals that are asked to travel the farthest possible distance to get themselves to the line in Oregon. So that'll be a fun trip. It's I don't know if they've done much cross transcontinental travel, but it's a longer road to get there than it is getting back, given the prevailing winds. But certainly a trip of a lifetime for many of these folks, where they get a chance to connect with some of these other top teams and individuals from around the country, and of course all the elite athletes as part of the Nike stable who are there enthusiastically rubbing shoulders with some of these young girls and boys as they celebrate the end of a very successful championship season in 2024. The final few runners coming to the line here as we'll keep the camera on that finish line before we transition. You're starting to see now our official results finally populate, and Monroe Woodbury, for the moment, is the winner here in this championship race. Xavier of New York currently in second. Colony is currently in third. Those results still unofficial.
And you really have to give a tremendous amount of credit to Monroe Woodbury's Shane Golio, who was the number one returnee, really rebounded from maybe a little bit of a lackluster earlier season performance. He takes 6 for Monroe Woodbury, leads the charge, and Gavin Catherwood, despite falling 17 places in the last half of the race, still was Monroe Woodbury's number 2 runner in 24th. And they, as they have been doing all year long, have led Monroe Woodbury. So you can see the start of the race here. By the way, a great finish for Ronaldo Rodriguez Perez of Monroe Woodbury. He finishes in 43rd. And Flowers taking the early lead. He ended up finishing 5th. But there you see Sykes right behind him as they ascended the first half of the race on the uphill. Then you'll see Sykes make an enormous move right here, right on that very first downhill. Sykes just leaves these guys like they're standing still. He took a little bit of a, almost spun out, and then Isanovsky came up right on Sykes' shoulder. Sykes made a definitive final move, and the young man, the sophomore from Chappaqua, New York, Horace Greeley High School, wins after finishing 11th last year. He was the number 1 freshman finisher last year, the number 1 sophomore finisher this year, and the number 1 overall finisher as well.
Just amazing what some of these young athletes can do as they come in with nothing to lose and everything to gain. And Ryan Sykes has gained a spot at Nike Cross Nationals, taking the victory here in 15:48.1, beating Thomas Isanovsky by a little more than 6 seconds. Halfway home in this New York Championship window, the girls' race coming up shortly here on runnerspace.com.